Welcome back to the Tactical Pause podcast. I'm Kevin Price.
Kevin Reed.
And before we get started, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And you know what? I've been looking throughout the week through the headlines to try to figure out what would be the best thing to talk about this week. I thought to myself, what would be the most appropriate thing for two straight white veteran men to talk about? And I said, trans rights. I actually found a headline that was talking about Idaho passing legislation which criminalizes the trans use of bathrooms. Now, I know this has been a big topic over probably the last decade, which I've always thought was kind of a silly argument. And the reason I say that is because if you're a biological male going into a female restroom, you undoubtedly have to use the stall, and vice versa. So who gives a fuck? What do you think, man?
I just never have had an experience in my life where someone walks into the bathroom and is like, "So are we fucking or what?" I've never had anyone leer at me in a bathroom. I've never had anyone like say, "Hey, are you down to party in here?" Like it just seems to me that it's anytime it deals with people's bits, and like the Republicans are like, "Oh, you got to use your bits in the ways we want to, not in the ways in the deep recesses of our mind we want to." And it's just a nonsensical like, who's going to the bathroom looking to fuck? You know, I had
Republicans?
someone. Yeah, it was that Republican congressman, God, what was it, 15, 20 years ago now, in the Minneapolis airport, who got caught trying to get a handy in one of the bathroom stalls at the airport. And you're like, bro, it's not us. Like, when we were on our Afghan tour, there was a soldier who was biologically female but was trying to transition in uniform. And he's a smart dude. That's the thing, too, is like, I knew what he was doing. And technically, by regulation, it was on me to report that and to report this soldier for discharge. Because at this time, we didn't accept, well, we don't now, but we had a little interregnum period where we did accept people who were transgender. But at the same time, I had to think, it's more work for me to do this. I have to do all the paperwork. I have to sit down in front of the soldier and counsel the soldier and say, hey, look, this is what I think you're trying to do. This is the regulation it violates. So now I got to take all this time out of my normal job description, out of everything else we're doing in Afghanistan, to process a soldier for discharge that is not going to get replaced. They're not going to replace him. They're not going to put him back. They're not going to give me someone from the rear and bring him up here. So now I'm going to waste all this time, money, and effort. I'm going to be down a troop that's smart, that's good, that knows what they're doing. I have them trained to produce documents exactly the way I need to, and I don't care. It is more work and effort for me to care than it was for me to just say, hey, look, I can't call you by the name you want in uniform, but I don't give a shit what you do. I just need you here at this time. I need you to do these things. And if people are messing with you, do let me know and we'll address it. And the shocking thing was, I know this is the intelligence community, no one cared. There were people who knew and they're like, yeah, all right, it's whatever. This is, you previously knew this soldier by this name. They would like you to call them by this name. And we're going to go back to work. Oh, okay. Thanks.
You know, when I was in the military, we had soldiers that were obviously of a different sexual orientation, and this was before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. And as long as you did your job, nobody really gave a shit. You know, who gives a fuck? If you're doing your job, you're good. You just keep doing that. And I find it interesting that the only time it becomes an issue is when it's Republicans involved. Like, look at the RNC, which, according to Grinder, is more like Pride Month overtime. It's just, I don't get their homophobia because, well, let me take that back. I do get their homophobia because you know what it comes from? It comes from repressing the ability to be whatever the fuck it is that you are. And they're trying to suppress it. They have to push it way down, and they think it won't come out, and it fucking does. And you know what? There's a place for you. It's called the Democratic Party. We got you. Come on, man. You know, but they're not going to do that because they've bought into this ideology that just goes so against that idea.
Well, it's just a reminder consistently that the conservative ideology is an ideology of enslavement. You'll never be who you truly are here. We'll never accept you unless you're these things. And don't you dare be gay. And if you are, you suppress it. And then you come out against gay people and you make that your platform. And the more I've thought about that since we last talked about it, the more I felt that's true. That to be a conservative is to enslave yourself to a very draconian set of virtues and ideals that seem to change only with who's got the power in the moment.
A lot of Republicans think that if somebody's gay, like they're automatically gonna want to pressure them in some unfair way. Like they're gonna be hit on by a gay person. Like it's gonna make them super uncomfortable. And I can tell you, as somebody that has been hit on by a gay person, gay people don't give a shit. Like if you say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not gay," they say, "Okay," and then they move on with their life. It's not that serious. So I don't understand most of their grievances with the issue.
I think part of it too is a thing where they think that they're so attractive that everyone would want to, like, I'd fuck me. Why wouldn't you fuck me? But not you. Part of me thinks it's this, teenage hubris where it's like, oh, well, I'd have sex with me, so surely any gay man in the Tri-County area is going to want to have sex with me. You're like, no, no, it's not how it works. So maybe that's part of it too. They just think that they're hot shit.
I did see a more positive article from Pennsylvania. They actually did something great. They approved a bill in their state house that actually redefined marriage. Instead of between a man and a woman, is just between two individuals, which I thought because of the federal law was a fucking thing anyway. But it was probably some dead language in their constitution that they had to write. But I think that's a big win. But it seems like the issues with the LGBT community have been vastly different between places like Pennsylvania or Idaho or Texas versus California. It's just, I kind of feel for them sometimes because it's just this ridiculous tug of war about your rights. And same with transgender people in the military. It's like you can be in, you can't be in. You're getting a dishonorable discharge. You're not getting a dishonorable discharge. Like, come on, stop fucking with people, man.
Well, and then, like, how are you going to feel if you're in that tug of war and it's eventually going to end and the conservative position will lose, as it always does in these sort of culture war things, and then we're still going to need the talent. We're still going to need those soldiers to be there, but we've shown them as the non-LGBTQ community that we are not reliable, that the moment the economy gets to a position where, oh, gas prices are too high, I guess we got to elect the person who is going to lower those prices, we think, but they're going to hurt that community. And you see sort of that balancing act that people do. I don't really think he could do too much damage to them, but I really can't afford $4.50 worth of a gallon of gas. And so I think there's a lot of unwillingness to confront in a lot of the public the absolute need to be honest about where we are and in those communities and be honest with each other about the expectation. Because transgender people aren't going to bathrooms to fuck. Transgender people aren't asking for anything else than to be respected for who they are in the workplace and in public. They're not walking around with their bits hanging out or anything. While they're transitioning, you might be able to tell someone is projecting a different gender than they were born with. At the same time, right? Like I go back to thinking he wasn't born Snoop Doggy Dogg, and I have no problem calling him Snoop Dogg. In fact, the time he liked something I put on Twitter before I left Twitter, that was a week long high for me. Like, oh, Uncle Snoop got me. And if you can go and call Calvin Broadus Snoop Doggy Dogg, you can come in the next day when someone says, I would like you to call me this name now. And all you have to do is say, oh, okay. It's the smallest effort. You spend more energy being angry and upset and demonizing this community than you would just ignoring it. You could still be contemptuous of it and just not say a word. It's so character defining too when someone comes out and says, oh, I hate the gays, or I don't like those transgender people, or whatever slurs they call them these days. I'm not in those circles. But the idea that, like, you're going to go to all that effort when you can literally just leave it alone.
Well, I think the majority of citizens do see through the ridiculousness, whether it be with the homophobia or the affordability crisis or what have you. And I think that is very evident in how Democrats are doing across the country. But since Trump took office in this most recent election, Democrats have flipped more than 2 dozen legislative districts nationwide. Now, we're talking state districts, but if that's any indication of how the midterms are going to do, we're doing fucking amazing.
Yeah.
There's two in Florida recently. One was Emily Gregory from the 87th House District, who flipped the district where Mar-a-Lago is. And the Republican that she beat previously won his general election by 19 percentage points. She won by 51 point something percent, but that's still fucking amazing to go from somebody that won the general election by 19 percentage points. That sounds like it's not flippable, and she flipped it. And then another senator seat was flipped by somebody named Brian Nathan, also in Florida, who won by about 405 votes. So it was a very close race, and they almost did a recount, but the state looked at the stats and they were like, "No, it's not necessary. You won." So, and that's a lot coming from Florida. I think the voters do see through the bullshit.
Yeah, I keep going back to that. I don't know if you remember seeing this, that tweet that Lindsey Graham made back in the late 2015, early 2016, said, if we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed and we will deserve it. And I keep thinking on how that tweet is aging so well that they have not just squandered the post World War II order for Trump's ego, but you're now losing seats you shouldn't even think about losing. I saw that there was a data analyst on CNN the other day who had a generic ballot is like almost 60-40 in favor of Democrats for the general election. And I know personalities will sway that a bit, but that's getting to like point of no return territory. You're getting to the point that you could put in a possum carcass, roadkill, run it as a Democrat, and it would still be favored over the Republican. If I was a Republican congressman, would scare me. I think it did too. I remember last week I told you that I'd heard intelligence that Sam Graves, my congressman, was going to retire, and he did. He retired on Thursday. He said he's not going to run for reelection. I'm sure the Republicans here in Missouri will put up some generic candidate out of the box, but that's a big deal. He's been in Congress 24 years. And I think he saw the writing on the wall and just said, yeah, this ain't it.
Seems like the formula for Democrats winning is Trump being president.
Well, and I think you have to be ambitious too. Like, it just kind of feels like post Obama, the party was just treading water. We were just saying, hey, look, we're not Trump, we're not Republicans, but people will go with the devil they know versus the devil they don't if you don't give them an ambitious policy proposal to say, if you vote for us, this is how we will lower prices. If you vote for us, this is how we are going to make sure that you have the rights in the Constitution. This is how we'll make sure the courts aren't stacked against you. And I think that they haven't done a good job of that until recently. And I think that comes with the wave of youth candidates that are coming in and the base being more vocal, I think, and like telling candidates, you cannot get my vote if you aren't going to support these things. And I think getting the party to move a little bit further to the left, closer to Bernie, closer to AOC, will be good. I think that what you see is those people win elections. So Ron Mamdani won as a progressive in a large city, which I normally gets votes Democrat, but you would think prior to that election that Cuomo would have been the hands-on favorite Democrat. He's a New York blue blood Democrat. His family's been there. They've got the name recognition. Yeah, the sexual assault stuff, which was bad, but was there anyone else savvy enough to tackle that? And I think what you saw in Mamdani was yes, there is, and it's not hard. You have to say this is what I'm proposing, and this is how I'm going to pay for it, and this is how it's going to benefit your life. And then that opens him up to say, I'll do all these things, and you don't have to worry about me groping women in the back rooms or anything. So I think that what Mamdani and AOC and Bernie continue to show is an economic populist message a la FDR is a winning one.
Well, it's one thing to have a message, and it's another thing to implement that message. And I think Mamdani's doing it. I think he will face a lot of hurdles, but ultimately, I think it'll be a good thing. I will say, however he performs is going to really impact how progressives are perceived. I think I've mentioned that before, but
Yeah.
I just feel like that's so true. Like, if Mamdani does not do well for whatever reason, it's going to stick with progressives for a long time. But if he does do well, it'll be really good for progressives. And another thing about Republican messaging, back to Trump's promises and that type of thing. Like at a State of the Union, we've been back to that a couple times, but he put up all these stats. 0% unemployment, zero people going across the border, groceries being more affordable, gas prices being as low as $1.80 something. He said in one instance. Voters go to the pump, they go to the grocery store, and they say, "The fuck if they are." Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, you can only lie so much. But when it starts hitting people's pocketbook, when it starts hitting people's lives, I mean, they can't ignore it. I mean, some people do because they're fucking idiots, but the majority of people who are sane cannot ignore this.
I mean, even today, we're coming back from the Easter egg hunt with our dogs. We put gas in the car. Normally would be $35. Today was almost 43. And then as we're in town, the gas prices jumped another 9 cents. We filled up at 341 when we left. When we were heading out of town, it was 349. Like it just feels like every time that Sarah and I know we need to get gas, we have to do it right away. It's cheaper for us to do it now than to wait for the morning on our way out to work, fill up with gas on the way to work. We just don't. It's what's the surprise going to be? Sarah and I are now having to figure out what we can buy in bulk because it's cheaper for us to do that. So meats, like ground beef, ground turkey, ground pork steaks, chicken, that kind of stuff is cheaper for me to buy in bulk from Sam's Club than to go to Walmart or Aldi or Mosher's here in town and get it there because the prices are so high. Even the prices of canned goods, the great value green beans used to be 68 cents a can. They're almost a dollar. They're not cheaper. Like we can go through the Walmart app because we do pickup orders during the week. I can go through that app and show this is more expensive, this is more expensive, this is more expensive. Even over the course of the past 6 weeks, a 24 pack of Dr. Pepper has gone from being $11.57 to now almost $15.
Shit, I know gas here on Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington. I filled up the other day and the gas was something like 5.36 a gallon, and that's in the cheap spot. It's probably 5 to 10 cents cheaper on base than it is off base, and that's 5.36. And I think last time we talked, I was about $1 cheaper than that. So I mean, this war is impacting gas. It just is. And again, I've said in the past, they always blame presidents for gas prices. I've always been the one to say presidents have little to nothing to do with the price of gas. But Donald Trump found a fucking way. He found a way. He's like, you know what? I give you Iran. I give you Venezuela. I give you this. And I think it's funny that he's using all this primarily for oil, but it's doing the exact fucking opposite of what he's trying to do. It's comical to me. It's not comical to me when I go to the pump. It's just got to be so embarrassing. How is this not embarrassing to Republicans? I feel like they are. I think they're just too far in. They
Yeah.
bought too far in to get out now. They're like, fuck, I gotta find a way to fucking defend this. I've listened to somebody defend one message and then the next week, because Trump's all over the place, have to defend the complete opposite message. I'm like, I thought that's where the fuck you were before. You know, we're for Elon Musk. We're against Elon Musk. We're for Elon Musk. We fucking hate electric vehicles. We love electric vehicles. Like, get your shit together, man.
You are Donald Trump's slave. You will do what he needs you to do. That's what it is. You're addicted to the money and the power. And so you're going to jump through the hoops. You're going to do everything it takes to continue to keep what you covet. You covet the position, you covet the access to power, you covet the access to money, and all the things that come with it. But the price you pay for that with Donald Trump is your integrity, it is your decency, it's your respectability. I have lost any ability to feel any sort of empathy for Republican congressmen. I'm like, wow, you got to defend that. Like when Obama was president and he had a controversial drone strike or something, like, I wouldn't want to have to defend that. But that's circus peanuts considered, hey, we may have committed a war crime jumping into Venezuela and grabbing that guy, and then we gave the helicopter pilot a Medal of Honor. And part of me is like, so Obama did some drone strikes I didn't like, but this is like outward, not just committing war crimes, but celebrating it. And I think that the ability to not have a conscience for that is, I hope, cost them their jobs in November. I hope so. And it looks good for that. But there's so many of those people that don't need to be there anymore.
And the fact that the Republicans in Congress and the Senate are so complicit of what Donald Trump is doing, I mean, there are some that stand up, but there's just not enough. You know,
Yeah.
we need more. We need more standing up and saying, hey, look, this is wrong. There's been a few, and some of the ones that have stood up are probably the more surprising ones. And to be fair, Democrats don't talk against Democrats as much either. You know, the progressive wing that sometimes does. You have the people like Fetterman that sometimes do. But for the most part, people generally fall in line with the party. But I think America's tired of partisan politics. But I also think that's what got Trump elected at the same time because they saw Donald Trump and they saw somebody that speaks his mind and says what he thinks. And they're used to politicians being more corrupt. And they say, okay, this person's a straight shooter. But I would argue that he's more corrupt than your standard politician. At this point, I'm like, he's not doing what you wanted him to do. So,
There's vast amounts of information out that showed he was not a good business person, that he barely skirted away from a major bankruptcy filing where he would have lost Trump Tower. He bankrupted a casino, which you almost have to intentionally do. There's plenty of evidence prior to him running for office that he was not the type of person you wanted there. But I think the MAGA coalition, too, was not just people on the right. You had people on the far left, like those health nuts, who listened to him speak their language in a way like, oh, we're going to get rid of these dyes in the food. We're going to make America healthy again, and we're not going to make vaccines mandatory. And you have these people that you traditionally think are like in facets to the left who have joined that MAGA coalition because they believe their conspiracy theories, they believe that they're right, that the science is wrong, and Trump stood for that. I think they're all kind of nuts. At the same time, I see how he built that coalition. I also see how it's fractured and how he's never delivered on even a third of what he said he would do for any of them. And now they're just kind of wandering away. So hopefully that bodes well for the midterms. I would like to see a progressive candidate run for president and win the nomination and then win. So, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I do think that the best campaigner Democrats have right now is Donald John Trump. You could just record him like speaking in his tongues, and I approve this message. Like it's just so odd and out there.
the thing is, Democrats don't have to talk about that though. That's the one thing
Yeah,
I'll say about Democrats. They need to work on their message because the message still doesn't need to be Donald Trump. Like we got that. We see that already. You don't have to fucking reiterate it. It's obvious. And they need to get their messaging more aligned with what they're going to do. It has
yeah,
to be tangible things that they're going to do. I mean, obviously, if you defeat Donald Trump, that's one thing you did. So we don't need to talk about that. When you're elected, what the fuck are you going to do? And I don't think that they have done a very good job at that. They're starting to get their act together, or at least some of the candidates are. I think Gavin Newsom is doing a good job because he's meeting Trump where he's at. He's not perfect by any means. Of course, I don't think any politician is, but he doesn't mind jabbing Trump. He really doesn't. And I love that
no,
shit. I'm there for it. He's somewhere between a progressive and a moderate, in my opinion. Being a progressive, I would like a more progressive candidate, but at the same time, I would be just as happy with Gavin Newsom.
and I think he runs a huge state, and I think that there are criticisms of how he would approach like national policy towards homelessness when he's not been very homeless friendly in parts of California. At the same time, I am going to be the first person to say that I do not think that there needs to be a national homelessness policy because I don't know how you do that without infringing on the rights of others, right? Like to me, federal law has to be like the t-shirt you get for donating blood. It's one size fits most. It has to be applicable easily across multiple facets of life. I think that what Gavin Newsom has done in California, and not just building a good coalition, I mean, think of how he's helped their economy. California farmers have more access to foreign markets than Missouri farmers do because your governor gives a shit. I understand that there's some progressives that argue against him, saying that he's just a moderate, he's essentially a right wing Democrat. At the same time, pragmatic policy doesn't always sound or look like the progressive circles I'm in. They're not always energetic and full of life. And sometimes it is just like, hey, we're going to build these housing units here, and until they're built, we're going to put these temporary trailers up and we're going to put people in shelters. And if you take one of these shelters and you have an addiction problem, we're going to make you go to addiction counseling. At the same time, you should have force them to do that. Well, let's address the root cause of the problem, right? If someone's homeless because they've fallen into substance abuse due to mental health crisis or something else, like shouldn't we address the root cause of the problem that is putting them into a homelessness situation rather than just giving them food and shelter and access to things? I think that that's a fair ask, that if we're going to make sure that you have housing and that you have shelter and food and access to utilities, that you're going to address the addiction part of it too, that we're not going to just let you waste away and we're not going to pay for that. And I think that's fair. I think that he's going to struggle in a primary system where that becomes an easy target for a bunch of progressives and leftists, of which I am one. But at the same time, I think that if you've not had to be in a leadership position, like a platoon sergeant, where you've got to go through barracks rooms and on post housing and understand that my idealism doesn't necessarily translate to applicable leadership that will affect change, it's easy to sit here and have a litmus test and to say, oh, well, he's going to do all this stuff. I don't want it. But if you see that he's created solutions and that he's followed through on those solutions, I think that is a good resume builder, at least for me, to potentially consider a presidential candidate.
I think he would do a great job as president. However, the only dilemma I think that he has in running for president is the fact that he's from California. Because if you ask most people, I think, what the most liberal or left leaning state is, they'd probably say California. And I think that might turn some people off. I do feel like he'll probably be the presidential nominee. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I can't say for certain. But there are things that happen in California that are a little too far left sometimes. Overregulation. Some of that contributes to the homelessness crisis, you
Yeah.
know? It really does. The fact that things cost people way more there. I'm here in Washington and I see homeless people a lot more than I would when I was in Texas. But at the same time, when I was in Houston, there's a ton of homeless people there. You just do not see them at the same level as you do because the police and the local authorities herd them to specific areas. They don't have that here. So I sometimes wonder if the homelessness is more here or if it's just the way that they handle it. That's what I wonder sometimes. Like I said, I don't have the stats. It probably is more here, but I just feel like they don't handle it quite the same way. They say, "Oh, we want to treat them more like human beings" and things like that. And in Texas, it is like, "No, you stay in this corner where we can't see you, and we're good."
So I looked it up. California currently has, according to their own state, 168,300 people that are currently considered homeless. That is a 9% drop from last year. I think it's a total of 10% drop from 2024. That is according to their own state. So take this with a grain of salt. They have seen the most significant drop out of anywhere in the United States. Apparently, nationwide, there's about 800,000 people who are unsheltered. So if you take, 780,000 and you subtract 168.3 from that, you're looking at still 611,700 throughout the rest of the country. California is also the biggest state by population, I believe. Probably getting chased by Texas at this point. I saw Texas has a lot of people moving there. So it's not a surprise to me to see that California has more homeless people. California's got better weather. People go to California to make their dreams come true, become an actor, get into TV, movies, radio, whatever. I mean, you hear stories all the time. People like, I just slept in my car until I made it. Sometimes some of that's chalked up to that, people chasing a dream. I think you could say that for New York City too, but it's also quite big. And so, yeah, you have 168,000 people who are homeless, but that's not concentrated in like LA and San Diego. I'm sure they have a majority in San Francisco. I'm sure they have the majority of them. It's just harder to see when the population is smaller. Here in my small town in Missouri, we have two or three people who are homeless who just ride their bikes around to a place to sleep. It's hard to find them because the town's very small and they typically disappear pretty quick after the sun rises.
9 to 10% drop. That seems pretty significant, though.
Yeah.
Kudos to Gavin Newsom. I didn't realize. I mean, that is a lot of homelessness, and I think we're supposed to say unhoused now.
Well, is
That's
homeless now considered
that's.
a slur?
I don't know if it's a slur. It's more appropriate to say unhoused, which is one thing. As a progressive, I have to say is a little annoying sometimes. I don't get hung up on the the terminology and cancel culture as much. And I wasn't going to talk about cancel culture tonight, but since we're talking about it, I do think that's one thing that does turn people off from the left. And Republicans look at something like that and they say, oh, this is such a ridiculous thing. You know, if somebody sexually assaults somebody at work and they get canceled, you know, that's understandable, right? The ones that I have an issue with are when people just say their opinions. Like,
Hmm.
there's a Republican, I think Gina Carano. She was on The Mandalorian, and she didn't come back after some comments she said. I can't quote what she said. In that situation, I don't necessarily agree with it. Well, I don't necessarily agree with, you know, her viewpoint. I also kind of feel like she should be able to say whatever she wants to say at the same
I
time.
mean, we got mad at people who lost their jobs for saying, I don't think Charlie Kirk was a good person. And conservatives went after them, went after their jobs. That's still cancel culture to me. I wasn't for that. I think that for me, if you're a professional actor and you come out and say something controversial or insulting, that's a character defining thing for me. I don't want you to lose your role on the show or the movie. I don't care. I just now know who you are. I now know exactly who you are and exactly what you stand for, and I'll make choices based on that. Now, one of my favorite TV shows in my 20s when I was raising a child, because I didn't have time, was Breaking Bad. I love that show. And if Bryan Cranston had to come out and been like, you know what, I'm for slavery, I'd be like, huh. I would probably not stop watching Breaking Bad, but I wouldn't be like, Bryan Cranston's a great actor either. You'd be like, yeah, he did a great job in Breaking Bad. I mean, yeah, just it's a character defining thing. It just shows me that that's the person you are, and I'll make choices based on that. But I don't think it's right to go after someone's career or job because they say something you disagree with.
I'm fine with people boycotting certain things. I mean, if you don't like something somebody does and you're like, I'm not going to listen to this person anymore. I'm not going to watch this person anymore. That I understand. I mean, I still listen to R. Kelly. I still listen to Michael Jackson. I still listen to, well, I don't really listen to P Diddy. I didn't really listen to him anyway. But you know what? Some person I stopped listening to is Nicki Minaj. I think she just really pissed me off when she got in Trump's camp. I was so disappointed because she had supported Democratic candidates in the past, and I was like, come on, Nicki, you you bought into Trump's bullshit, and now she's so far in. She's stuck there.
Isn't it like
I don't
she's
know.
an immigrant, right? She's not from America. She immigrated here,
Don't get
right?
me
Like
lying.
I'll look it up. I think that's right. I think because I think that's what it was, is that she was running out of time, and Trump gave her like that gold card, whatever.
Well, they're trying to deport everybody now anyway. They're fucking
She's
trying
from
to deport
Trinidad.
Ilyan Omar.
Oh yeah.
They're I don't know if you saw that, but they're saying that she came here fraudulently, and they're actually
Oh
trying
yeah.
to go after her for that, which I think is fucking terrible. You know, I think she's been fairly silent since they brought that up, and I mean I guess I can understand why, but they think immigration has become such a big problem here.
Nicki Minaj's husband is a sex offender, convicted sex offender.
Oh, yeah,
So
that fits. Maybe she is a Republican. I
I, I think too, like a lot of those political discussions that we were used to having prior to Trump about tax policy and border policy and that kind of stuff have long gone away. I think you see vestiges of the old Republican machine in that party, but it has become a party concentrated on wealth and power and influence and the corruption that they can have because they have those things. And so I could see why Nicki Minaj has gone there. She's not from America. She had just gotten her, according to the article I just read, she was granted her American citizenship after a joint appearance with Donald Trump. So has she been bought off? Did Donald Trump say, hey, I need your help, and if you'll do this, we'll just give you your citizenship? So is she now? I mean, I would only consider her a mouthpiece for the Trump administration at this point. So I would like if I enjoyed her music, I would not listen to anything else but that. And if it's like, oh, did you hear what Nicki Minaj said? No, I don't care.
think it's a
Uh,
way to bring across more black voters. Personally,
you know,
that's what I think it is. But you know, it could be the wielding of power. You know, and I think that's sometimes why he gets us in these wars is because he's power hungry. I think it's a combination of reasons. But lately, I don't know if you've heard. I'm sure you have. It's been in the news a lot where they've been talking about the potential of bringing back a draft. I even saw that Rob Snyder called on the Republican Party to bring back the draft. But to me, while we are militarily involved, I want to calm people's nerves a little bit because we are not as heavily involved as people think. Yes, we're bombing. Yes, we're sending a couple thousand troops that direction, but it's not anywhere near the extent where you require a draft. I I don't know where this is coming from. I think it might be coming from people that just don't know better. They see military action and they assume that. Now, if it gets to a massive scale, like maybe, but I don't know. I
I mean,
just
you're
don't. I
talking
don't think
World
it's
War
even.
scale.
Yeah, I don't think it's. I don't think we're on World War scale yet. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that if the right pieces fall into place, we could be on World War scale, but we're not. We don't have massive troop involvement yet. I say yet because I mean anything could fucking happen. But as of this moment, I don't feel like that is a concern.
I also would not feel that way. I had friends that were serving with me that were recalled from the inactive ready reserve. They're going to get all of those numbers first before they'll even institute a draft. Raising the enlistment age to 42 really, I think, is to get prior service guys that want to come back in or considering it an avenue to do so because you don't have to retrain in the MOS. You don't have to spend the money to put them back through basic training. To really just able to reorient them back to the force and put them back in it. So I think that if we're looking at a draft, you're talking not just about multiple troop involvements for a long time because we didn't have a draft in Iraq in '07 when we had the surge there. We had a lot of IRR guys who were called back up. You had people who were on the temporary disabled retired list who were given waivers, wink, wink, and then brought back into service. That will be more likely than not. I think if you're looking at a draft, you're talking about fighting on multiple different continents, not just Iran. You're talking parts of like Eastern Europe, possibly Russia, God forbid China or anything. I mean, you're talking about a massive, like all hands type of conflict. I just don't see Trump able. I'm sure he could get us into it. I just don't think he's got the follow through on it.
I definitely think he could, but I don't think he has a follow through either. And a fun fact about prior service going in the military as a former recruiter, you can actually join much older than 42 if you're prior service. So what they do if you're prior service, say you had 10 years in service and you get out and you go back in and now you're 50, you could still join because what they do is they take your age and they subtract the amount of years that you were in from your age, and that's the age that they use for getting back in. So that's the formula they use, which a lot of people don't know.
I didn't know that, which
Oh,
makes sense now why the National Guard recruiter texted me last week and said, "Hey, would you like to talk about other opportunities that you might have in the Army?" And I had to say, "Guy, I'm medically retired. I got medically retired at 15 years. You can't. You need an act of Congress to bring me back. Please take me off your list."
I mean, we still have selective service, but it's more of a structural thing. You know, if you're 18 to 25, you have to do that. But as a recruiter, they required us to get their selective service number. It's a part of the application process. And if they don't have one, you guide them to the appropriate website, you put it in, you get their selective service number, boom. So you can't really even join the military without having a selective service number. And once you're in, you can use your DD 214 as proof, you know.
Right,
And when you join the service, no matter what your contract is, you have a minimum of an 8 year commitment.
right,
Like when you sign your contract, if your initial enlistment's 4 years, you have 4 years and then another 4 years of inactive ready reserve. So that's the time frame in which they can call you back if shit hits the fan, you know. So it doesn't matter, regardless of what your contract is, you know, full time, you have an 8 year commitment, and after that, you know, you're good. But yeah,
Did you see that they had lowered the threshold for marijuana on people coming into the military? I thought that was really interesting. That they're like, we're as long as you can come clean within like 30 days, we don't care.
when I was a recruiter, you couldn't have a drug paraphernalia charge. You can have anything drug related. Like it was just a complete no go. But they raise and lower standards all the time based on the needs of the military. When I first joined, I talked to you about this earlier, I think the age was 42 or 43, and we had older people going into basic training and they're having knee injuries and ankle injuries and all these different things during PT because their bodies couldn't handle it quite the same, unfortunately. I mean, some of them could hold their own, but eventually they said, "Oh, okay, maybe we need to shave the age back down a little bit." But every time they get into these predicaments, they end up lowering the standards. We had the most lax tattoo policy out of anybody. We had the most lax hair policy for females. We had, I mean, there was one point you couldn't join if you had a GED unless you had a much higher score in the ASVAB. They changed those standards. So we have something when you're a recruiter they call business rules that come out from USAREC, that's the U.S. Army Recruiting Command. You have your general regulations and stuff, but those are little changes that come out, and that's how you would look to see how much the standards changed on that, or legal drug policies or tattoo policies or what have you. It changes constantly, like sometimes fucking daily. You're like, oh, I thought this person could join. No, they can't fucking join. It sucks when you have a contract that you're you're trying to put in because
Right. Yeah.
you have to change on a dime sometimes.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that. I know the converse of that when I was being medically retired was because they had reconstricted the standards back to what they were. And so now you have a bunch of, I mean, I was a clear, there would have never been a standard that allowed me to stay because of my injuries. But I remember having people who were my age who were substandard in weapons qual or were always on the line for height and weight or PT tests. They were just told either you're not going to be allowed to reenlist or we're sending you home due to needs of the Army. I watched two staff sergeants who were thinking they were going to get promoted to sergeant first class go to the battalion commander being told we're releasing you for needs of the Army because we don't have enough positions for you and you're not making the grade. You are not competitive enough to stay here. And I thought, wow, that was because that's support Huachuca. This is the schoolhouse. This is where a lot of NCOs in the intelligence community make 7 and 8, right? Either you're a drill sergeant in AIT or you're an instructor. And there are people who are thinking they're going to get told, hey, you've made the start first class list. And instead they're being told, we're sending you home. You're not even going to get to retire. You've been in the Army, 16, 17 years, and there's no longer a spot for you.
Well, there's so much that goes into going in and out of the military, and I, for one, really hope. I don't think we will, but I really hope that we don't come to having a draft. But I think that's a great spot to end for today. And I want to say that if you did enjoy this episode, please make sure that you subscribe to the channel. It really does help the channel to grow. I'm Kevin Price,
And Kevin Reed,
and we'll catch you on the next episode of Tactical Pause.